Have you traveled much in your life?
Not so terribly much. No.
Is that something you wanted to do?
I always wanted to. The whole time I farmed, I kept thinking, when I retire, I'm going to do a lot of traveling. But things don't always work out. First thing I was going to do, I was going to head south and check the hardware stores. And when I come to a hardware store and they asked about a snow shovel and they didn't know what it was, that's where I was going to stop. But that didn't work out.
What kept you from doing that?
Well, one thing, my wife never was a good traveler. She didn't like traveling too much. And one reason for that, my wife hasn't talked out loud for years. She had to have a vocal cord taken out down in Denver, and it left her where she whispers. And it's real hard for her to visit with people. And I could understand, she didn't like to be with other people, and it made it bad. So we never got to travel like we planned on.
Why did she have to have her vocal cords removed?
She had years ago, when she was younger, they had to take out a goiter out of her throat. She had a goiter operation, and the doctors kind of flubbed up. They left a scar in there on her one vocal cord. And then later years, that scar started growing, and it was closing her throat up. And she got to where she couldn't breathe. And so they had to take that out. And they done a tracheotomy here on her chest for a while, but thank goodness they got to take that out. It healed up enough. So she gets by pretty good.
So when she communicates with your children, is it through letters usually? Do they write letters back and forth?
What was that?
Does she write letters to your two children in order to communicate?
Well, yeah, she used to. And when her and I was on the road pulling trailer with my truck, she'd have to write me notes, not have to write her notes, because she couldn't hear too good either. But our kids was just great. They was with her. They never mimicked her or sassed her, nothing. They never give her any problems. And our son, when she had that done, our son was only 6 months old. So he never did hear her voice. And our daughter was only 3, and I don't think she can hardly remember what her mom's voice sounded like. But they just turned out great over it all.
Did they help out a lot on the farm growing up?
Yes. Yeah, they sure did. They both. That's one thing about farming. Your children, they learn to work. And they learn that everyone has to work together. But yes, they did. Our daughter didn't drive the tractors, so much like that, but our son, he learned when he was just pretty young.
So did boys and girls have different responsibilities on the farm?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of responsibilities?
Well, actually, our daughter, she never had to help. She never had to help milk or do our chores so much. She was always helping her mom with housework and stuff. But my son, he learned at a young age to do it all.
Do you think that kids have it too easy these days with all the technology and everything?
Well, I don't know how to answer that for sure. I think there is, to a certain extent, they could do a little more things to not concentrate on games and some of these TV shows and things. I don't think it hurt them to, learn something a little bit different. That's another thing. When we grew up, all the kids in the neighborhood, we had to create our own games to do and everything. You don't see kids nowadays shooting marbles or playing jacks. Jumping rope. There's a lot of these people you see on TV, it wouldn't hurt them to jump some rope. It wouldn't hurt me either. I'm one of them that's, but I don't know whether they have it too easy or what, but
Did your kids go to Greeley High School then?
no, they went to Valley High. It's down at Platteville Gilchrist schools.
How close was that to your farm?
Oh, probably 15 miles. Actually, they went to high school at Gilchrist. And they had school buses for them.
Did they go to college?
They took courses, yes. Uh-huh.
At where?
Well, Albert went to Denver. And Judy she just took some courses over at Boulder places.
So they didn't stay in Greeley?
No.
Okay.
No, they never stayed at UNC.
So when you were a kid, of course, at the BB Draw school, right?
Mhm.
All the recreation was out there in the yard. That's what there was, right? During
Well,
school
that's
day.
true. Yes. One thing we did have out there at BB Draw that I remember was a darn good baseball team.
Yeah.
We never had enough kids, boys, to have basketball and some of the other games. Football, there was no way. And we was kind of limited. We had track, and we could pretty well hold our own around the city schools on that.
As I remember with BB Draw, you were competing with other, not only
Well,
little schools, but there were some other
well,
schools that
some
were 2
bigger
or 3 times the
schools
size,
over
right?
around Greeley,
Yeah.
yes. Uh-huh.
So the point was you were competing against BB Draw, even though it was way out in the country, you still had games with other schools.
Oh,
and-
yes, yes, there's, other schools. I can't recall all their names. I know Big Ben was there, and there was one south of Kersey. And there was one south winds, and there was a north winds out towards the Milton Lake. Skyview was over on the south, way south of Kersey. Valley View. A lot of little schools, you know, around.
What did you do in your free time as a kid, like with your brothers and sisters or your friends or neighbors?
Oh, we'd go, there was lakes around there, we'd go swimming and we'd go fishing. And Steve's grandparents had a lake in the winter, freeze up in their pasture. We'd go down there and build bonfires and go ice skating and roast marshmallows and hot dogs.
But you weren't so connected to the town life,
No,
ever, right?
not much. Why I ever ended up in Greeley is beyond me, because I never liked town.
You have a house in Greeley now?
Yes. Used to be 2 boats in my family, and now there's only 1. That's the way I got there.
What don't you like about town life?
Nothing. Very little I like about town life, except I can walk. I can still walk to the grocery store. And they built a new hardware store close enough I can walk to it. But actually, I don't go shopping in the big stores or anything. My wife wants me to, but sometimes I don't hardly.
Do you still find ways to get out and enjoy nature?
Pretty well, sometimes, yeah.
If you didn't like, sorry, go ahead. I was just gonna say, if you didn't like the city life that much, was it just for convenience that you moved to Greeley?
Yes,
Okay.
that's all it was for. It was close to the hospital, close to grocery stores. Yes, comes a time when you have to think about all that things.
Mhm.
Are there still people on farms now that you knew or knew from like
There's a few.
early adulthood that are still
I s-
farming?
Yes, there's still some of them farming. Yeah. I go visit with them sometimes.
When you were a kid with your family, did you guys get along really well with your parents and with each other? And what would you guys do together?
We did practically everything together. Once in a while in the summer, we'd get caught up. And my dad and mother, we had an old truck with a cattle rack on it. We put a tarp over it, and us 5 kids would get in the back and they'd head up the mountain somewhere, you know, and spend a little time. We never could spend much time on account of the livestock and everything, but we'd get away like that. And one thing I remember when us kids was all growing up, our folks, my mother was a pretty good musician. She could play the piano or the accordion. She could even play the banjo some. And my folks, they go to different places on Saturday nights. Different people that play different instruments, and they'd get together and they'd make big pot of chili or soup or something, you know, And nobody ever left their kids home. They'd take the kids with them. And it was just nice that way, because then we would play with the other kids. We'd kind of get off parts of the houses by ourselves, and they'd have their little dances or whatever they'd done, you know. It was, and I think you were closer. I think the families was all closer in them days.
How big was a typical house on a farm?
Well, you very seldom seen one less than 3 bedrooms, but there's also, they'd have bunkhouses out in the yard somewhere. And some of the kids, when they got big enough, they'd sleep out there and bunk out there.
Did you have to share a bedroom with your
Yes,
siblings?
that's one thing. When us 4 boys at one time, all 4 of us was in a bedroom, and we had bunk beds. You put one on one side and one on the other.
Did you like that, or was it a pain?
Well,
in the
it was just one of the grown-up deals. I mean, with us. Later on, Dad built onto the house. But, yeah, for a while, we just had the 2 bedrooms in that particular house. 3 bedrooms. Our sister always had her own room. But,
Did you have to hire other people to come help work on the farm, or was it just your family that worked on it?
basically, it was our family. We did, at times, like thinning beets. If we'd also do it, but we'd hire extra help. Back during the war, we had the prison camp at Greeley, and we'd go over every day and haul prisoners out to help thin and hoe beets. And that was sort of interesting. You know, and they liked it. It was hard to talk to them if you could. Some of them could talk English, but gosh, they got treated good. We got letters afterwards from some of them, you know.
Were those German prisoners?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Would they stay at the farm, or would they go back
No,
at night?
you could take them back every evening. There was a guard come with them.
Oh, okay.
Uh-huh.
But you had to supply the transportation to go and get them and
Yes,
take them back,
we
right?
used farm trucks
Right.
to go get
And
them.
how many would come on a day?
It only seemed to me like there'd only be 10 or 12 on our crew.
Yeah.
I'm sure some of the bigger farmers had more.
And did you have to pay anything for that, or was that just?
Yeah,
you
you had to pay. I don't remember what that was, but you had to pay some on
And
it.
you had to supply lunch, is that what happened too? Or did they bring lunch?
No, they pretty well had their lunch, but
Huh.
still, we always had a break in the morning and in the afternoon for 'em. Folks would, you know.
Did you learn any German from any of them?
No. No, and I had a Mexican kids that I grew up with,
Mhm.
and him and his sister went to school, and they always promised me they'd teach me how to speak it.
Uh-huh.
And one time I got so I could sing a song with him a little bit. But to this day, I never learned to speak it, and I always wanted to. But they worked on a dairy right across from the schoolhouse.
Mhm.
They had it made, they could just walk to school. But, and another thing, they talk about these country schools. When their parents changed jobs, they moved to Denver, we got letters from them kids. Well, they'd even come down and visit sometimes, the parents would. Every one of their kids skipped a grade when they went into Denver schools, into the city schools.
So the country schools were ahead.
We was that far ahead or something, because it just seemed like kids in the country learned more or something. I don't know what there was about it, but, and they were just average, you know, in our school. But that was amazing when that happened.
It had to do with, because I was in the same situation. I went to that same school, and you had all 3 grades in one room. And so you sat there and you listened to the 2nd grade and the 3rd grade instruction. So you'd already been through all the material.
So you went twice. Wow.
So you're going over twice or 3 times, yeah.
Was
So,
part of it because it was so small? Then they would just
yeah, we
you'd
had,
get more, I mean, time individually.
oh yeah, because there was one teacher and possibly, I think there were, in our room, there were not 20 kids in 3 grades.
And
One-
you said
one
you
teacher.
only had, what, 9 in yours?
Yeah, in the 8th grade, there was only 9. Yeah.
Wow.
So when, after 8th grade, did you work on the farm full-time?
Sure did.
What do you do now that you're retired and living in town?
Well, first thing I do in the morning, I walk to McDonald's and have coffee with some old cronies, which is a pretty good walk for me. I suppose it's close to a mile, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
At least that.
Does your wife go too?
No, she can't walk.
Oh, she.
I mean, get out and walk.
Uh-huh.
She works in the yard yet and everything. We don't have no lawn. We got an Arizona yard. We have flowers, and rocks.
What's your favorite memory of living on the farm? What do you remember most?
Well, like I say, burning the mortgage, but yeah, I know what you mean. I guess you'd have to say there's nothing really stands out too much.
Did your brothers have farms of their own once they?
No,
It was only you? You were the only
Yeah,
one that had a farm?
I'm the only one of us 4 boys that ended up on a farm, and none of us ended up with Dad's place.
What happened to that place?
He sold it to some other people. I only lived half a mile or so from where my folks farm. When I first bought my farm, well, I farmed theirs too, till they decided to sell it, and then it just happened that I wasn't in a position to buy it, or I would have bought it. But I couldn't. I did buy another one.
What did-
Across the road from me, a quarter section.
Did your brothers and sisters stay in Greeley and
Uh,
do something there in town, or did they move away?
No, after my sister got married, she lived at Gilchrist, and she passed away. She wasn't very old, maybe 62 or 3. She got cancer. She never smoked. But her husband did. But I don't know what caused it. But actually, it was in her back. It got on the bone, and then. But she, my sister. She never farmed
Mhm.
as such, you know.
Did her husband farm?
Yes, he was a farmer to start with, and they did farm for a couple of years after they got married. But then he went to work as a truck driver. He also worked at Montfort's as a mechanic there at Greeley.
What did your 3 brothers end up doing since they didn't farm?
My older brother, he spent about 22 years working at elevator at LaSalle and Peckham, grain elevators. And then about 20 years ago, he moved to Red Feather Lakes. And he went to work as a heavy equipment operator for Fox Acres. It's a big golf course up there. It's fabulous. It's good. And I've got a brother in Arizona. He put in 12 or more years in the Air Force. And then when he got out, he does heavy equipment operating and things like that. He builds pads for houses and trailers. My youngest brother lives in Powell, Wyoming. Right now he's working in Billings, Montana. He's putting in some more golf courses. He does that. This particular golf course, when he gets this part done, it'll be 36 holes.